Mist clings to a plowed field that has been churned into glue by rain. Boots sink, horses snort, and somewhere in the gray a bowstring twangs like a snapped wire. You're standing behind a row of ash staves taller than you, the air already tasting of wet earth and fear, and you probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes out there without training. Ahead, the world narrows 2 lanes between sharpened stakes, and the men beside you set their feet as if rooting into the mud itself. This is not a duel. It is a machine that needs every part. To understand that machine, start with an officially recognized hinge of history, the Battle of Agincourt, the 25th of October 1415. Henry V's army is outnumbered, sick, and boxed in between woods. Yet it chooses to fight on ground that turns French cavalry into a slow-motion stampede. The English longbow line isn't just archers in a row. It's a formation designed to function like a storm front, massed shooters on the flanks, protected by stakes, with men-at-arms in the center to anchor the line and finish what arrows begin. The army's battle rhythm depends on this. Archers open with long-range volleys to provoke and disorder, then tighten the tempo as enemies bog down, recycling targets while the center holds dot. The strength is obvious and still debated in academic circles over shock versus attrition. Longbows deliver terrifying volume, not pinpoint sniping. A practiced archer can loose 10 to 12 arrows a minute, meaning a few thousand men can fill the sky faster than any crossbow corps. The weakness is equally real. The line needs space, dry bowstrings, and protection. If flanked or rushed before volleys bite, archers are vulnerable in close quarters. Skills matter more than legend. Each archer must judge distance by eye, keep a steady draw under fatigue, aim collectively rather than individually, and obey timing signals, whistles, banners, even shouted cadence. A strange side fact: skeletons of longbowmen show enlarged left arms and warped spines from lifelong practice, a physical signature of the formation itself. Compared with earlier missile systems, say, Mongol horse archers or Roman auxilia with composite bows, the English longbow line is less mobile but far more concentrated. A static thunder cloud built to break a charge through disciplined repetition. Rather than roaming harassment. The mud at Agincourt is only the last act. The longbow line begins years earlier in villages, butts, and royal statutes. England didn't stumble into this weapon. An officially recognized turning point sits in law as much as in battle. Edward III's ordinances in the 1330s, 1360s, and later acts under Richard II and Henry IV that required regular archery practice on Sundays and holidays. In other words, the army's formation is formed in peacetime, when a captain musters men. He isn't hiring hobbyists. He's tapping a national muscle trained by habit and expectation. Recruitment flows through indenture contracts. A lord or captain promises a certain number of archers, often 2 or 3 times the men-at-arms. Because the line's function depends on density, equipment is standardized enough to mass-produce results. 6-foot yew or ash boughs, sheaves of arrows, carried in linen bags, a buckler or small shield, and a mallet for driving stakes. Those stakes are the longbow line's quiet genius. Because an archer's best work is done standing still with space to draw, the army builds a bristling hedge in front of each shooting file. The line thus behaves like a fortified firing platform that can be set up fast, even on campaign. On the march, logistics are the hidden discipline. Wagon trains carry tens of thousands of arrows, sorted by length and head-type bodkin for penetration, broadhead for horses and unarmored men. Officers count sheaves like modern ammunition crates. In battle, the army functions through simple, repeatable orders: plant stakes, dress ranks, wait for the signal, then loose by shot or flight, meaning coordinated volleys rather than individual trigger happiness. The strength here is efficiency. Cheap soldiers relative to knights. Rapid training once the childhood foundation exists, and a formation that can be deployed quickly. The weakness is bottleneck materials. Good yew is scarce. Arrows require skilled fletchers, and wet weather can soften bowstrings. One reason spare strings are carried wrapped in waxed cloth. The skills demanded are half athletic, half mental. A full draw near 100 to 160 pounds, endurance to repeat it hundreds of times. and the coolness to shoot on command even while enemies close. A lesser-known fact, some captains issued livery hoods or colored badges to archers to help keep line integrity in smoke and rain. Scholars still argue an ongoing academic debate over whether English success came more from longbow technology or from the administrative system that made massed lines possible, compared with Geno's crossbowmen, who rely on mechanical power and pavises. Longbow archers are a living artillery battery, faster, more flexible, but dependent on the body as the engine dots, so when the line finally meets the enemy, it is less a moment than a practiced ceremony. The French learned this the hard way at another officially recognized milestone, the Battle of Crécy on the 26th of August 1346. Edward III chooses a gentle slope, plants his men-at-arms in the center, and sets archers in shallow wings like open doors. When the first Geno's crossbowmen advance, they do so under a sky that has already darkened. English archers have been ordered to step forward, loose at long flight range, then fall back behind their stakes in friendly infantry. The army functions here like a clock, a forward pulse to disrupt, a backward click to reset, and then the steady drumbeat of volleys. The rain of arrows is not poetic exaggeration. Crécy shows the formation's core strength, sustained volume that compounds enemy mistakes. The crossbowmen's slow reload and wet strings after a storm mean their return fire is thin. The longbow line, by contrast, keeps tempo. Archers aim in arcs, not at faces. Front ranks shoot low to hit horses and legs. Rear ranks loft higher to reach deeper files. This layered fire is a formation skill, not a solo trick. Once French cavalry surges through the disordered crossbow screen, they ride into mud, stakes, and a tightening kill zone where each wave arrives already frayed. Modern analysts might call it area denial through saturation. Yet the weakness rides alongside the strength. Crécy works because the line is protected and the enemy obliges with frontal assaults. If the French had combined armed skirmishers to harry flanks, coordinated infantry to seize the archers' ground, the machine could have been jammed. The longbow line needs time to shoot. Steal that time, and you steal its bite. Each archer's required skill set peaks here, judging when to switch from long-range flight shots to shorter point-blank volleys, keeping arrows dry and knocked in rhythm, and listening for relay commands amid the roar. A strange side fact from Crécy: some English units allegedly carried extra arrows stuck upright in the soil in front of them, primitive ready racks that speed loading, though historians note in academic debate that sources disagree on how widespread this was, compared to steppe horse archers, who win by mobility and feigned retreat. The English line wins by stubborn geometry. It doesn't chase you. It forces you to cross a map of falling wood and iron on its terms. After Crécy, enemies start to understand that the longbow line is not merely dangerous, it is hard to unmake. You see that hardness at the Battle of Poitiers, the 19th of September 1356, another officially recognized event where the formation is tested under pressure rather than perfect setup. The Black Prince is retreating with a smaller force, cornered near hedges and vineyards. French troops try a more measured advance than Crécy's chaos, sending dismounted men-at-arms forward to close the distance. The English response reveals the iron discipline inside the line. Archers don't break into skirmishing. They hold their intervals, pivot their shooting lanes, and keep volley timing even when the enemy is walking steadily toward them. The army's functioning in this kind of fight is about coordination. Between stillness and sudden motion, archers are ordered to shoot, step, and set loose a volley. Take a few controlled paces to keep optimal range, then reset behind stakes or natural barriers. Men-at-arms in the center are not spectators. They police the line's edges, prevent gaps, and prepare to surge when French momentum stalls. Command signals, horn blasts, shouted color callouts, or a captain raising a polar mac like a conductor's baton. Under pressure, the line's strength is psychological as much as physical. Enemies feel time stretching in a corridor of arrows, while archers feel time in beats they've practiced since childhood. But discipline has a cost. It demands skills. Beyond drawing a heavy bow, archers must control fear. Resist the impulse to run when armored men loom close, and trust that their neighbors will keep pace. They also need battlefield literacy, knowing when to spare arrows for the decisive wave, when to aim low for horses or high for packed bodies, and when to drop bows and draw sidearms. Many carried falcons, hatchets, or mallet stools that say, without romance, "This line can fight if it's touched." A lesser-known side fact: some archers at Poitiers reportedly used wagon lodgers and hedgerows as ad hoc stakes, showing the formation could improvise fortification when timber wasn't ready. In academic debate, Poitiers is often cited. To argue strategy over technology, the line's effectiveness relied on calm, drilled response under stress, not just bow power. Compared with Swiss pike blocks of the next century, which depend on forward shock, the longbow line depends on holding shape long enough for distance to do the killing for you. Still, even a thunder cloud can be scattered. The longbow line has cracks, and they show whenever its assumptions are violated: terrain, timing, or protection. An officially recognized moment where those cracks widen is the Battle of Patay, the 18th of June 1429, late in the Hundred Years' War. Here the English are trying to recreate Agincourt's recipe: archers out front, stakes ready, men at arms behind. But the French, now sharper and more coordinated, don't wait. Their vanguard finds the English before the line is dressed, before stakes are planted, and cavalry hits like a door slammed on fingers. The formation never becomes the machine it wants to be. Patay exposes a central weakness: the longbow line is brutally dependent on setup time. Without stakes and a clean frontage, archers are a vulnerable workforce holding cumbersome tools. Even with discipline, a line caught in motion is a line half blind, bows unstrung, arrows packed, ranks uneven. Another counter is simple numbers and angles. If an enemy can fix the center with infantry and slide mounted troops around a flank, the rain falls the wrong way, and archers are forced to fight as light infantry against heavier men. Weather plays a quieter role, too. Wet strings slacken draw weight. Gusting wind turns flight shots to waste. The line's strength is still volume and morale shock, but only if the enemy is made to advance through that volume on a predictable path. Skills needed in failure are different from skills needed in triumph. Archers must recognize when the line is lost and shift into tight knots behind men at arms, using mallets and swords, protecting banners to preserve retreat order. Veterans also learn conservation: loosing too early at long range can empty quivers before the decisive minute, a mistake noted in several campaigns. A strange, lesser-known side fact: captured English arrowheads were sometimes reforged by French smiths into their own ammunition, suggesting that even opponents valued the material culture of the line. In academic debate, Patay fuels the argument that longbows were not an unbeatable superweapon, but a system with narrow conditions for dominance. Compared with Ottoman composite bow cavalry or later handgunners, the longbow line is less adaptable to surprise. It is devastating when it controls distance, fragile when distance collapses. The line survives Patay not as a guaranteed winner, but as an idea with a long afterlife. By the 1440s and 1450s, France reorganizes its armies. English finances falter, and gunpowder weapons creep from novelty to habit. Yet the longbow line's logic keeps echoing. An officially recognized waypoint for that transition is the Battle of Castellon on the 17th of July 1453, often marked as the last major battle of the Hundred Years' War. The English march to relieve a siege, expecting another defensive set piece, but the French have dug in behind earthworks and cannon, so the old archer's solution can't even be tried. The fight ends with artillery doing what arrows once did, stopping an advance before it can find its footing. Even so, the army functioned the longbow line tautmast. Timed missile fire coordinated with a steady infantry corps doesn't vanish. It mutates. English captains begin pairing archers with early handgunners, treating both as blocks of shot. Across Europe, pike formations start sprouting sleeves of firearms on the flanks, a visual rhyme of old archer wings. The longbow line's enduring strength is doctrinal. It proved that trained common soldiers, firing in cadence, could decide battles against richer, armored elites who assumed courage alone could close distance, the skills of the longbowman become a kind of lost athletic art, distance judgment by eye, full draw endurance, and collective rhythm where 1,000 men loose like one breath. A lesser-known side fact, Tudor warships sometimes carried longbows as backup because damp powder was unreliable at sea, showing the weapon lingered wherever conditions favored silent speed. Scholars still debate whether the bow declined because guns were inherently better or because England could no longer sustain the training culture that fed the line. Compared with earlier missile armies from Persian archers at Plataea to Roman slingers, the English longbow line is a rare case where national policy and battlefield formation fused into a single strategic identity, then faded when either half weakened. Conclusion and effectiveness assessment step back from the mud and thunder, and the longbow line looks less like a medieval miracle and more like a tuned system. Its effectiveness came from three pieces locking together: a weapon with range and rate of fire, a formation that protected its users to exploit distance, and a social pipeline that produced archers by the thousand. When any one piece slipped, stakes not planted, ground to tight, discipline frayed, the system could fall apart fast, as Pate proved. In battle terms, the line functioned as controlled attrition wrapped in shock. It didn't need every arrow to pierce armor. It needed most arrows to land somewhere useful, often enough to slow, steer, and shatter again and again in advance. That made it strategically cheap and psychologically expensive for opponents. Armies built around heroic charges or slow crossbow exchanges had to solve a new math problem: how to cross open space under sustained fire without losing cohesion. Some did through combined arms, flanking, or refusing to be baited into a straight rush. Its weaknesses were real and ancient. Like many missile formations from Rome to Persia, it relied on space, clear fields of fire, and a protected front. Unlike mobile steppe archers, it could not simply relocate when the map turned against it. The skill demands were steep: years of practice, bodily hardening, and the mental calm to shoot in cadence while danger approached. So was it the decisive weapon of its age? The scholarly dispute will keep going, but the balanced answer is that it was decisive when paired with terrain choice and disciplined command. The longbow line didn't win England every battle, yet for more than a century it let a smaller kingdom punch above its weight, and its volley fire legacy lived on after the bows fell silent.